ADCS and ALTA. We have 4 papers, two long papers from ADCS, each 20 minutes each. And then we'll have 2 poster papers from ALTA. There's no question answer in the ALTA papers because we have the posters right away after that. So the first 2 papers are from ADCS, and the first paper, Pranav is present. Thank you.
Hi, welcome. I'm Pranav Bhandari, currently a student here at Flinders, doing a master's in computer science, and the co-author of the paper, Investigating Language Used by Polarized Groups on Twitter, a case study of the bushfires. So we base our study on the bushfires, a mishap that happened in 2019 and 20 in Australia, which caused a significant damage. So it burned almost 60 million acres of land in Australia, damaged more than 3,000 properties, and killed a minimum of 34 people in Australia, not to mention all the wildlife and the habitats that we lost during the period. So in this paper, we've looked into the language used by the polarized group following the tweets during the event. So in a contemporary scenario, anything that is capable of a public discourse is highly moving towards the social media. So if there is a particular topic that occurs in social media, there is a group of people with different opinions. They are who express their opinions in the topic. So it's obvious that when there are different opinions among the people, it might be contrasting. And thus the concept of polarization comes. So when there are people with when there are people talking on the same topic and have 2 completely different opinions, then these groups are the polarized groups. So polarization is a study that has been effectively conducted in politics, majorly in American politics, but here we're trying to get that inherited into a non-political experience such as ours, the bushfires in Australia. So we wanted to see how polarization or polarized groups works in the bushfire data sets. So if we could analyze the languages that are used by these polarized groups in the case of the bushfires, we might be able to shed some light in the mechanisms of the polarizations that were caused. So this is widely used in American politics or political debates, and different methods have been used, but yet even simpler methods such as the n-gram analysis might share some good light into it. So looking at the data set, as I talked about, it's a data set that contains tweets following the bushfires in 2019 and 20 in Australia. So what was noticed was that there were 2 different polarized groups when these tweets were collected. So talking about these groups, there are 2 different distinct groups. One is the supporter and the other is opposers. The supporter group were the ones that supported that arson theory, or arsonists were the cause of the bushfires that lead all of these bushfires, whereas there were opposers who countered that fact that it is more recent context like climate changes and other factors that might have caused these bushfires. So we're looking and analyzing the languages used by these different polarized groups. The unaffiliated groups is another group that we couldn't classify it into any of these supporters or opposers groups, so they are a separate part of it. All the data sets were manually labeled. So the contributions, firstly, we look into the language used by these polarized groups. And the second thing is that mostly the judgment of moral and emotional valence has been limited to American politics, and specifically American politics until now. So we are transferring that to our non-political scenario. So we are also analyzing the emotional valence of the text. So we do that through the calculation of bias and intensity, which we will talk about later. And another is that we look into linguistic styles or happiness scores, and the languages such as the content and style words. This will come later as well. So in the analysis, we use 3 different techniques for the analysis of this tweet. The first one is to calculate the moral scores. So we used the moral scores. There is a moral foundation theory that expresses that every moral frames that every framing that we use in our languages, we can categorize them into 5 different moral foundation categories. So the moral foundation dictionary makes the use of those which helps to categorize the words into these categories. So the 5 major categories that we're talking about is the authority, care, fairness, loyalty, and sanctity. So we do not only consider the vice domain of these categories, but also the virtue domains. So, for example, if you're considering care as virtue, then its opposite, we also consider the hate of it. That's the vice domain. If we consider fairness, we'll also consider cheating. If we consider loyalty, we will also consider dishonesty, and so on for the others. So using all of these and a method that's called the frame axis method, which is a modular based approach. So we use this to calculate the moral scores, and then we compare it in different scenarios. So mainly the focus of this were bias and intensity. These 2 topics. The bias defines how relevant a tweet or a document is to a moral foundations, whereas the intensity defines how intense the use of moral language has been in this kind of documents. So if the bias values are negative, we tend to conclude that these are vice in domain, whereas if they are positive, then we conclude that they are in virtue domains. So the next one that we consider is happiness scores. So we usually can divide our thoughts and processes into positivity and negativity. For the happiness scores, we use the happiness dictionary. It contains around 10,000 words in different languages, and the scores are ranged from 0 to 9. Of course, 9 being the highest, happiest numbers. So the next one is the linguistic content and styles. So in this, what happens is that the choice of words, the main thing that we focus on when we communicate with someone is the choice of their words. So how they choose their words, we can exactly know the mood or the context they are talking about. So there are 2 different factors for this. We choose the content words and the style words. So the content words are the ones that gives what the context or what the content of the text is. The style words are more of the ones that reflects the emotional levels of the of these texts. So content words are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. So whereas the style words are pronouns, interjections, and conjunctions. So for this, we use a simple POS part of speech tagger, and these embeddings, we use the TF-IDF vectorizers for its obvious reasons that we provide more weight on the words that are frequently used. So talking about the results from the moral scores, looking at the x-axis represents all the moral foundations, whereas the y-axis are the scores for this. So the vice and virtue domains are also given. This is for the supporter category, the ones who supported that arson theory was the cause of the bushfires. So looking at these scores, we can see that they were morally, it's not a good result. They're highly vice in nature, and although we can see some traces of virtue natures as well, but they're significantly lacking in the case of the supporter category. But surprisingly, where we thought opposers were the one who were presenting facts and figures and doing a meaningful conversation, we didn't find much moral soundness in those tweets as well. Here also, we did the same vice dominant nature was found in these conversations as well. So overall, they promoted a kind of negative attitude towards the topic that was being discussed. So as we spoke before, the bias and intensity of this course. So the green ones, the green box plots are for the opposer category, whereas the purples one are for this supporter category. So if we look at the bias scores that are the first 5 scores, we usually see these are all negative in nature. So that means that as we've seen before, it's vice dominant. Looking at the intensity levels, we see that the use of moral words are not so intense in these tweets in both of these categories. So what we wanted to know was if there was a major difference between the moral words or the moral languages used between these 2 categories, but unfortunately that was not the case. They were both comparable, and there is no distinction that we could separate and find that this is a category that used a larger percentage or a less percentage of moral words. So the next one is happiness scores. So as stated before, the opposite category were happier because they were more focused on presenting the facts and figures rather than just showing up that one theory is good, is just haphazardly good, or is the reason. So they were more happier than the supporter or the unaffiliated groups. So when we looked at the top 10% of the words used, there was not much differences in them as well. So all the words they used were the spread of misinformation and words like controversies, and these kind of words were used. So there was not much distinction between the words in each of the categories. So since we could see that the supporter were more likely spreading fake news and misinformations. They were more angry or had more fear, and the happiness scores were lower in these cases. So in the supporters case, yes, negative speech were used in across all domains in the data set. So it was the case. So finally, we did the linguistic style and content analysis. So in this content analysis, since this topic is, since the tweets are collected around a same topic, that's the hashtag arson emergency data set. So the content that they spoke about was pretty much the same. So on a cosine similarity matrix, we found that all of these groups had a very high similarity based on the content level. But looking at the styles, in the style words, we can see that the supporter to opposer relation is really low, and opposer to unaffiliated is really low, but supporter and unaffiliated is significant compared to the others. So this means that initially we didn't know what unaffiliated groups had with them, what they presented with them. So with this, we can't make a very rigid decision, but we can say that they might be closer to the supporters group in the conversations. So this is also a possible indicator that the opposers were not emotionally similar to other 2 groups. So in conclusion, we looked at the language used by these 2 different polarized groups. So looking at the moral scores and moral frequency, we couldn't find a major difference as it would be in other political discourse or similar cases. But the opposers who were against the arson theory were more positive, used more positive words, and were more happier than compared to the supporters of the arson theory. The use of moral words in the unaffiliated group was really high, and so the supporters who were in support of the arson theory had lower moral standards, had lower use of moral standards in their words, and they were not happy as the other groups. So in the future, we'd like to see a time series, how this polarized group works, how they transition into different phases, and what are the effects of these discussions over time. So these are the references, and thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering whether for the happiness factor, you also looked at emojis?
We did have a look at the emojis as well, um, but I believe they were limited with the happiness dictionary. So yes, so it was a bit before. I believe the dictionary was updated in 2013 or somewhere.
Mhm.
So that might be. So there might be some faults in due to that.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Right, anyone in the online audience have any questions? If not, then we move on to the. Thank you.
Thank you.